Oh man, evening, folks. It's been I like my commute home today was an hour and 40 minutes. So needless to say, I kind of barely got here in time. Oh, I love the traffic in my area. It's great. It's great. It's great. Oh man. So we've had a week, haven't we? Just all sorts of interesting things in global news, and yeah, I'd just rather talk about fish. Oh man, sometimes I feel like we need to just like get away from all that. Whether no matter which side of a coin you fall on, or what uh what your personal feelings about certain things are. Sometimes it's just good to like disengage for a little bit, let your brain, maybe your emotions have a little bit of a break, you know what I'm saying? Richie, I'll never complain about my 30-minute commute again. Yeah, so in theory, if there was no traffic, my drive from home to work should be about 35 minutes each way. But traffic in the Seattle area, especially, is atrocious. And it's like that in like from about 6:30 in the morning until about 7 o'clock at night. It's horrid, just everywhere. You trying to get anywhere, especially if you need to be on a freeway, just because there's just so many people, and a lot of the civil decisions that were made about like how big the freeway should be and how some of the roads are and things like that do not leave sufficient public transport to take that many cars off the road. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough. Like I leave my house to go to work anywhere between 6:15 and 6:30 in the morning because I have to be in kind of early, and it still takes me an hour to get to work. So getting to work is not as bad. Coming home is worse. Yeah, not fun. Not fun. 7-minute commute. I mean, for a little while, I worked from home, and my commute was like 30 feet. It was nothing. But yeah, I miss having small commutes. I really do. But unfortunately, in this area, just the cost of living and things like that, in order to um, have a home in this area, and if I were to try and buy a house now, I couldn't afford one. Um, I got lucky in the time that I bought my house is when like the market was really low. Because otherwise, basically, almost any time after that, I would never have been able to afford a home. So, I count my blessings a little bit, but I did have to move kind of far away from where I grew up and where I worked. So, yeah, we do what we do, right? I once had a 3-minute commute. Well, was that like you walked out the front door and walked across the street? Oh man, I can't imagine commutes that small anymore. I think my smallest commute I've ever had as a working individual was about 20 minutes. But that wasn't bad, right? It was all like side streets and pretty easy peasy. Uh, but yeah, yeah, not anymore. All right. So because I don't really have a specific topic, a lot of that is just because I was too busy at work to let my brain think of a topic. We'll do kind of a more open-ended Q&A. I can talk about some generic fish stuff I have planned in the sense of like videos and stuff. So, um, Paul Soltero, what's this thing called a commute? That's that thing you used to do, you know, before you retired. Oh man! Of course, your entire day was kind of like a commute because of what you did. So, but let's see. So, I'm working on. Of course, we're doing testing on the anoxic tank, and the people who are losing their mind over it being cloudy. It is actually getting slightly better. It's a slow process. And I don't want to restart the tank from the ground up because it just means it's so much more time. And frankly, I'm getting kind of frustrated having that tank with nothing in it. It is starting to drive me a little crazy, but for the sake of our experimentation, I can keep it up a little bit longer, but I can't keep it up. I can't like burn that thing to the ground and start over and have to do it for like another 9 months or something. Like that's not happening. But anyway, so we've got that. I'm working on a video comparing the new Aquarium Co-op and North Fin very small granules. They were labeled at the time of purchase nano, but I think at least Aquarium Co-op has changed the name of their product because turns out that was trademarked by Extreme, and I'll compare them to the original, which is Extreme, just because I like a lot of Extreme's products, and I want to see if there's any measurable difference between the three, because that might matter for some folks. Like, I tend to not use the Nano very often, because I have a personal affinity for flake, but maybe there's something in one of those products that is noteworthy for you guys. Although I do use the Nano pellet in some tanks in my house, just not a lot. So that's one of the videos I'm working on. It's more about like getting some time in with those three foods and kind of just observing them and watching them, and then I've got to put them on film too, so that you guys can see them and see some of the differences. But it's getting used to some of that stuff. And then I also have, I put this. I have a fun aquarium, not aquarium video coming up. It's kind of both. I don't know how to better describe it without giving it away and making it not as, to me at least, not as entertaining. We'll put it that way. If it's spoiled too much, I don't think it's as fun, but yeah. Did you see the message I sent you about the new filter? So I saw your message, Paul, but I didn't get to dig in it too much because I was really busy at work. Let me actually go take a look at it. Because why not? Why not? Aquatic circle. So we're a Kickstarter, huh? They're playing a dangerous game with that logo. I will say that. Let me actually share screen. You guys can look at what I'm looking at. Where is that? Let me get this. That one. Okay. There you go. So it's a Kickstarter. We probably won't have audio, but it's kind of their story. We'll skip a lot of this, but it's supposed to be the filter that requires no water changes, supposedly. But you still need to add water because you're going to have evaporation. Okay, so we're putting plants in the back. There's other ways to do this that I think would be less of a giant box. Actually, another video I'm working on. Let me watch the video itself. Yeah, we're probably talking about how horrible it is doing gravel switches. Sorry, I'm going to skip ahead because I can only take so much when I'm not listening to audio. Show me the product. There we go. Okay, so basically our goal is just to use nitrates, and it looks like some kind of pseudo under gravel thing. I can already tell you some of this, like, in this prop video without even listening to the audio. From a marketing perspective, there are lots of things I would change. Listening to the audio would help me give better context, but I totally didn't ever work in marketing, guys. I promise. Yeah. Okay, so basically it's just putting an immersed plant bed in the back and using plants as your filtration method, but it makes it available to a larger scale of fish because not all fish will be happy with plants in the tank itself. Okay, there's some extra stuff we can do there. I'm not really sure how you're making that function with salt water very well, but, that's a thing. We'll undo that. I'll look at it in more in depth, but my initial thought is Hector, who's in chat, has kind of already brought out a product, and that's another video I'm working on. Although, Hector, I need the other one you're spending me, buddy. Just casual reminder. The one with the big wide lip, because my tank is dumb. That we're using as our tester. Hector, who's Hector's Everything, has a really cool system for hanging, basically these hanging baskets that can hang on the side of your tank. It's got a clamp system. It's a little less intrusive. It's not a giant box. It's designed to be a singular hanger, and there's one that's a basket standalone, and there's one with a basket with a raised pole for like your kind of crawling plants, think like your pothos and things like that, something that want to crawl or grab onto things, right? It gives you the option for both, where you could just do a very similar thing where you're immersing the roots of the plant in probably some kind of gravel or something to anchor it. I'm sure some people would look at like hydrogen, but hydrogen can be kind of floaty, so there's a risk depending on your water level, etc., etc. Maybe you're just using some other things, whatever that may be, but yeah. So I think there's other options. My concern is that like that from a general concept, I probably need to watch it more in depth and listen to their pitch as far as their audio is concerned. But my general concern is there is an aesthetic thing that some people will immediately just like switch off any interest with like kind of a big black plastic box on the back of the tank. But, you know, I'll look more in depth because I'm sure they've got some other options, and that's just kind of the prototype where they might refine it more because it is a Kickstarter. But yeah, interesting concept to like build that in as a more direct filter. But again, you have like kind of a contained sponge filter down below too. So yeah. I don't know. Interesting. But yeah, so there's that video, which is the one with Hector's like little planters. I can't remember the actual product name. You'll have to forgive me, Hector. But there's some interesting things that I think we can do to alter the way that we keep like plants as an excuse, as an example, which is part of why I'm doing that video. And that's coming up. I'm just waiting on a part from Hector that he was going to send me. So that I have one though. I could do it probably with just the one I have. I just want to be able to show the two different versions that he has. So we were waiting on the other version because he didn't have one when I was at Fishtoberfest that we felt would guaranteed fit the really wide rim on my Aquarium Masters tank that my Pleco colony sits in, because them Plecos like to destroy everything I try to put in there. So yeah, we have to go with immersed plants to do that game. And I think I'm going to try peace lilies just because I like peace lilies a lot, but we'll see. Might be two different plants. I'm going to let my wife kind of choose those things. Luke, sup, y'all, just finished constructing a greenhouse today, working on plant flats. Hector's clip works pretty well. I have many net pots on the system. Awesome. You guys talking about me again? Occasionally, Whip. We were discussing how I, a couple weeks ago, mercilessly destroyed your fantasy football team. And then last week, Kenny mercilessly destroyed my football team. So it's all full circle, right? Man, for you guys that play fantasy football in any way, shape, or form, I'm only in 2 leagues, and I was absolutely dominating both leagues, and then I had a string of like 3 games in a row that went bad for both teams, and so now I'm just kind of like doing okay. It's kind of miserable. But such is the way of sports. Sports can change at a moment's notice. But yeah. My good team has 3 wins. Oh, Whip. I'm sorry, buddy. Well, you'll win the miscongeniality prize, right? Oh man. But yeah. So those are the projects I have going. So one with all the nano foods. Just trying to compare the 3 that are out now. Now that Extreme kind of has a little competition on their nano granule I'm working on the anoxic system. While it doesn't look pretty because the water's a little cloudy, the actual like numbers look okay, but they're still kind of in line with, even though I've added a carbon source, they're still in line with not doing what we're looking for them to do. So it's hard to say. I'm sure I'm gonna get the perpetual, well, you haven't done it for enough time, and blah 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 blah. And to me, it's like, if you need that much time to get a system to do its thing, I don't know that that's a system that is something I would ever care about. I mean, I'm sure it's great. From a pure perspective of just drawing water toward the roots, if you kept a lot of root feeding plants, great. Right? Because it actually makes it easier to ensure that nutrition is continuously going toward your root feeders. I'm on board with that. But from a perspective of saying the anoxic system is what's doing this, not so on board, just because my experiment's not showing me anything, and I haven't seen others that prove it without plants, right? With plants, I get it. I get it, but we gotta, yeah. But what do you do? I've had so many people in the last like month, you guys will probably find this funny, who have basically it only happens on the Undergravel Filter Sucks video from the Your Filter Sucks versus Your Filter is Awesome series, right? And it amuses me every time, because you'll get these people who are big fans of Undergravel filters, and either didn't listen to the pretext of the series of where it's like, hey, we're going to do one video that says these are the bads, and one video, I keep saying filter. I can English. One video that's like, here's the good, now you make your choice, right? And so every time I have this, like, I have to really rein back the urge to get snarky in the comments, because it's like, you've clearly missed the point of this series. So a lot of it is more me like, hey man, so the point of the series is this. It's for you to decide after you watch both videos. Clearly you're already on the positive side. That's all that matters. Cool, it works for you? Perfect, don't change it. I also get a lot of people who are like, you're not explaining the system right. And Kevin Novak's anoxic system. I'm like, no, we're not discussing anoxic. We're discussing undergravel filters. Grandpa's filter was not an anoxic filter. Grandpa's filter was an undergravel with a bunch of cheap gravel on top. That's it. Right? Oh. But, yeah, such is life. Got people who are, they get really passionate about certain things, which I find, I always get a smile whenever I see it, because I don't care if they can get almost vile in the comments with me, and I don't care, because it's like, cool, you have a thing you like, so keep doing it. But I think a lot of people don't realize, like, when I give them that answer, they're just kind of like, I never see responses to it. It's like, okay, works for you? Cool. Then don't change it. Keep doing it. Great. Oh, man. Making meatballs and enjoying Bentley. Questionable combo. I'm just saying. You know what? Not to throw too much shade at my wife, because I love her dearly, but she does not like meatballs. That was a point of contention at one point in my life, because I like, with certain pasta dishes, I love having like meatballs, and she does not like them at all. She also doesn't like sausage, and so it's like, you're cutting out several food types I love. With very specific meals that are usually cold weather meals. And so this time of year, it's like, I want this, but can't do it because my wife doesn't like it. Oh, man. Derek, you never get any responses. Yeah, I totally understand. It's hard. It's hard to like respond back to that with anything other than like, okay. Right? It's kind of the agree to disagree kind of thing, in a sense. Like, we can agree to disagree, and that's okay, right? Or maybe, things happen. Robert, Remember the PetSmart trick. Anything brewing that could replace it or be anywhere near as great. No, they very clearly don't want to do that because it was too good for the consumer. they have they have little coupons you can earn, but they don't have like the treat trail like they used to. Forgive me for a second. I can feel my nose being a bit of a jerk. Ugh. But they don't have anything coming that is even remotely close to that. They have some like simple coupon stuff you can earn and some like points, a point redeem system thing, but it's nowhere near as good or as effective for us as a consumer as the old treat trail was. So obviously they decided that the few people who were using that were getting too good a deal and they weren't making nearly enough money, so they had to get rid of it. Which sucks because, yes, I imagine that when the stores were stacking coupons, which they weren't supposed to do, but some would, and their systems did not prevent that from occurring. So I don't necessarily fault the employees because the employees are like, oh, you have another coupon? Beep. Oh, system says it works. Like, to me, that's a fault at the level of the company in their point of sale system, right? But that might be the software tester in me. Right? Being like, well, you let this loophole be in here. That's your fault. But, it's just one of those things where, like, I can't fault the employees. And certain employees would just be like, oh, I'm pretty sure you're only allowed to have one coupon, so I won't even scan it. And that's fine, right? But when we would stack those things, we would get insane deals. And I'm sure they were losing a bit of money on some of the product when you're doing that. But if you regularly shop there, I kind of feel like it's okay for a person to get a deal every once in a while. It's actually like really beneficial to them and not always just purely beneficial for a large corporation that is very soulless. But maybe that's me. I don't know. Regina was wondering if the shells of dead ramshorn snails cause negative effects to water parameters. I can't detect anything from water testing, but empty shells aren't pretty. The only thing it can, in theory, do is slowly allow extra minerals to go into the water. Now, granted, during the time in which if you had the snail's corpse still in there and it wasn't eaten by something, it could potentially be adding excess ammonia to the system, but the likelihood is small because fish are naturally scavengers, so if they find something like that, they're going to scavenge. And it also depends on the type of fish you have, right? But aside from what it looks like, which I don't necessarily personally care, right? It doesn't bother me, which is why you'll see all sorts of shells in certain tanks of mine. But for you, it does, right? So from an aesthetic perspective, it's not really hurting you. But if you don't like the way it looks, like, by all means, get them out of there. It's a little bit of a process. I'll fully admit that, but you can get them out of there. But yeah, to my knowledge, we'll put it that way, to my knowledge, there's no adverse effects leaving the empty shells within the water system. Whips World, I usually just say noted when people tell me they disagree with me, threatened to unsub or whatever. That's the other thing. Like, I don't understand. I've had a number of people in my time doing like various online stuff, whether it is FishTube or some other things that I've I did game streaming for a little while before I kind of decided I wanted to do fish related content because I used to game quite a lot and at one point was very good at certain games. Not so much anymore. But and you get these comments every once in a while where people like effectively are making threats or like, I'm gonna unsub. It's like, okay, why? Just do it. Because it's like, if someone caters to your every single whim, that person is never going to be happy. And I mean, and by I mean is the like both people in this, because the person who gets every whim of theirs catered to is going to find something that bothers them every time. And that's going to make the person who is trying to cater to that other person have their own, like, realistically, like, mental health impact. Because it's like, man, nothing's ever good enough for this person. So just disengage, right? It's kind of you kind of have stuff like that in the working world too, where if you have a manager who seems like they never have positive feedback, they only ever see negatives and they're only telling you how they need X, Y, and Z. I will give you an example. A little while back at a job I used to work, I remember when I first started there, I would ask my boss if I could take certain days off. Right? So like when something was coming up, let's say I had a medical appointment or whatever, I'd be like, hey, just want to know if it's okay if I take some time off on this day and because I've got to go to a doctor's appointment. And what I found with this particular person when I was interacting with them is they would usually say yes. However, they would always give me some kind of gruff. Like, well, that's going to have an impact to our work and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, you find me a doctor's office. It's open Saturday and Sunday. Right? That's in the back of my head. I never said it. Then eventually I just got to the point of where I decided, like, I'm tired of playing that game because you always give me gruff. So I would just go up and go, I'm taking this day off. I have a medical appointment. I won't be here. This is your heads up. Okay, bye. Right? It's like, it's one of those things where, like, sometimes you have to, in life, whether it is your working life, your personal life, whatever it may be, and I'm not saying, like, immediately start doing this with your spouse or something, or your significant other, but it's more like, every once in a while, you kind of have to just be like, this is what is going to occur. Opinions don't matter. This is just going to happen. Okay? Okay, good. So, like, when you deal with, say, for us creators, like Whip, right? When you deal with those people, you just have to eventually just go, like, okay. You can't let it phase you, right? But it's similar, like, you got a boss who's being an absolute jerk. Sometimes you just gotta be like, well, here are my normal working hours, and I will get it done during that period of time, and after that period of time, those are my times. Bye. Right? Your time's precious. We'll get back to fish. Stop talking about dumb stuff. Robert, it was a great trick. Stop preventing us from getting our 125-gallon tank last year. Yeah, man, if you were buying 125s of that, you could get a screaming deal as far as savings is concerned when you have to buy them retail. Oof, yeah. Okay, flatbed aquatics. I was told long time ago, you listen to everyone that has experience in fill in the blank. You may or may not like what or how they say it, but you will always learn something. I think that's a great perspective, right? In the sense that, like, if someone has an expertise somewhere, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing you're looking for necessarily, but if they tell you something, there's always an opportunity to learn from it, especially if it comes from a level of experience. But yeah. I like it. It's good. It's a good frame of mind. Okay, Judd, can you discuss CO2 in fish? Best species of fish for high CO2, etc. Let me ask you this question first, Judd, because this might help us. Is there a particular reason why you feel you need high CO2? Like, are you trying to cultivate really difficult plants? Or are you trying to get, like, is your goal to grow at really insane rates to where you need to do significant amounts of maintenance? That's my first question to you. And I don't necessarily need a perfect answer, but the reason why I ask this is this. Very often, we'll get told things about CO2 where we don't necessarily need what we think we need. So, like, let me give you an example. If you use a very good CO2 reactor, about 3 bubbles a second can get a 75-gallon tank almost dead on to 30 parts per million, because you're not really losing any gas like you would in an in-tank diffuser. The reactors basically diffuse 99.9% of the gas they're releasing into the water. So they naturally have a significantly higher parts per million for the amount of gas being used on the tank. Now, if you're not using that, that might be one of the ways that you kind of fix your problem, in that you can use a piece of equipment rather than worrying about specific species of fish. It's a lot easier to attain higher, and I put this in quotation marks, higher or targeted levels of CO2 with really good equipment, as opposed to completely configuring everything around this goal CO2 and then making sure your fish can survive. Now, the second part of this is you can have higher levels of CO2 with many fish as long as you also have high levels of oxygenation. And you can't rely 100% on your plants to provide that high level of oxygenation. So my example here would be this. If you were using a sump as your filtration, right? You might not be, but let's go with this for a second. It's really easy in the sump chambers to put a bunch of extra air stones or to use something like a wet dry, which naturally creates a significant amount of oxygen within the water system. And then near your pump chamber, you would have a CO2 reactor, and you can keep your amount of bubbles per second actually surprisingly low, but still get a very high level of part per million CO2 in your water system, because you're getting a significantly better diffusion rate and absorption rate into the water column itself. This solves a couple problems. But if you don't have a sump, right, you can just use other equipment that helps increase the amount of oxygenation in your tank. So similar to how you have a reactor to bring in CO2, like you could have an inline reactor working with a canister filter, there are ways to kind of hide, if you will, additional oxygenation within your aquarium. One way is just by having more surface agitation. And you're going to get paranoid and be like, but I'm going to lose my CO2. You're not really losing that much. Don't stress about that so much. Why am I going this route? It is a lot easier to set up a system with higher oxygenation levels so that you have more flexibility in your fish than for me to go like, okay, you have to have this exact fish and these fish and these fish. They're going to do really good in a high CO2 environment. But the general, if you really want like the general rule, you don't want a lot of river and stream fish if your goal is to have high CO2. Those fish naturally come from highly oxygenated environments, and because you're going to push your CO2 heavier, you're going to have less available oxygen. We'll put that in some quotation marks. Less available. There's ways to get lots of available oxygen. It's just about what you're targeting, right? And if you have certain aesthetic looks you're looking for, like if you don't like the look of bubbles in your aquarium, or you don't like trying to use a venturi, as Paul is kind of suggesting in chat, those options start dwindling on providing excess oxygen. What I would say is go look at a lot of the big aquascaping tanks that push heavy CO2 and look at the fish they use to stock their aquariums. Those are probably safe fish to use in yours. Rather than me telling you specific species of fish, I would rather you get inspired by other tanks, if that makes sense. Because I think that gives you the opportunity to not only look at the plants they're using and some of their setup and help inform yourself better, Judd, based on that kind of information and what your goals are for your tank. Like you want to carpet. Cool. But are you trying to carpet an easier plant, like say Japan clover or microsort or something like that? Or are you trying to get like dwarf baby tears, which is a much more difficult and demanding plant? Well, you might want to look at other tanks that use the same carpeting plant and try to see like what kind of equipment are they using? How much CO2 are they pushing? How much light are they pushing? What kind of fish are in those aquariums? That can help inform your decisions and help kind of inspire you to build something that you not only like, but also has like the parameters or choices you want that will lead you on a path to success. What I will say is rainbows don't do very well, in my experience, in high CO2 tanks. So avoid rainbows. And a lot of your like hillstream loaches and other fish that deal with similar high oxygenation environments tend to struggle in high CO2. There's ways to get around that, but it does require either A, very specific sets of equipment, or B, just tons of experience in being able to dial in exactly where you need to be on things like how much CO2 you're putting in, how much light you're using, etc., etc. I hope that helps, though, Judd. I hope that helps. Appreciate your question. Hope I answered it enough. We'll put it that way. Oh, man. Convict sickles will stop them? Uh-oh. We're talking about using convicts to stop something. I'm worried about this path. That's all I'm saying. Convicts have a reputation. That reputation is prolific creation of baby fish. Paul Soltero has a Venturi on his high temperature discus tank. So that should give you an example, right? Higher temperature water holds less oxygen. So by using something like a Venturi, you can increase the oxygenation in the water column, even on high temperature, to help make sure that you have sufficient oxygen for something like a discus, as an example. Good. Am I right to infer that low pH loving Amazonian fish might be good directions to go? Yeah, that tends to be really common in the aquascaping world. So a lot of your softer water, low pH Amazonian fish tend to do well in higher CO2 environments. But keep in mind, many of those fish live in environments where there's basically a 1,000% water change every second, right? It's just constant flowing water in many cases. Not all, but many. So they are used to environments with a significant amount of oxygen as well. So, it's one of those things where it's about equipping your tank correctly based on what you're trying to do. It's doable. Absolutely doable. And not necessarily something where you're going to like, man, I'm going to spend like $500 more on gear. We're not talking about something like that, but more like there might be one extra thing you can do that significantly raises your chance of success. Hope that helps. What's a Venturi? Really, Whip? You don't know a Venturi? So, a Venturi is most commonly used on sumps, but it's an intake type that causes that like whirlpool to occur as the water is going down. So a lot of your like overflow boxes have an ability to naturally create a Venturi, which is that cyclical water flow. And because it sits there doing that kind of cyclone effect, it causes significantly more agitation and thus oxygenation of the water as it's going down through the drain and getting into your filtration system. English I can do. I promise. Alyssa, I'm a little behind, but if you intend to do a no water change experiment on your Wabbamoosers, may I please buy a pair off you beforehand? Oh, it's not about no water change necessarily. They'll constantly get water, but I do have spares if you need some. Alyssa, if you need some and you want to breed them, I will just give you a pair. You got to get them out of my tank. I'll just give them to you. No, the difference is because it's really hard, because I have that tank bare bottom, it's really hard to get plants in that tank and not have the plecos also destroy them. So I'm using some of Hector's really awesome hang-on pots that allow me to use some immersed plants just as a nitrate absorber so that I can be extra thorough about that tank. That's all it comes down to. Plus, it adds some extra plants in a different way and lets me test the product and play with it and put some pretty plants potentially in there for my wife because that's in the room with her that she sees often. Yes, I'm just trying to do some stuff and some things. I'm not trying to go like we're gonna never do a water change ever again. No, I believe in water changes. That tank gets more water changes than any other tank in my house. So that's the thing. It gets at least a 50% a week, and usually it gets like a 50% plus a top off. So it's getting a reasonable amount of dilution every week because it's completely open top with two different filters pushing surface agitation. So it evaporates a good amount. But yeah, if you want Wabbamoosers, by all means, you can take some of mine, and hopefully they will give you baby fish. My mom losers are terrible parents. They kick their eggs out all the time. But you're actually better at setting those tanks up. So yeah. Mine's set up like the worst way possible, probably at this point. Robert, do you still start trying Northfin worm-shaped food when it comes out? It'll be the Bug Pro recipe. So I try not to test too many foods because it's really hard to effectively test food when all of your fish are, for the most part, rainbow fish, which are, let's just say, the least picky eaters out there. They'll eat like everything. As long as it fits in their mouth, they'll eat it, right? Other than like maybe other fish. They're not that aggressive, but I mean, when it comes to feeding them, they don't care really what it is. I haven't seen anything be like completely ignored by them, if that makes sense. I have seen things that when they hit the water, because it naturally puts a scent in the water a bit more and faster, they attack it faster. But honestly, if I'm in the room and I start walking toward the tank like this, they're at the water waiting. Like, it's rainbows. They will do anything for food. Clearly, they've never been fed ever before. It's the worst atrocity to man like you've never seen. like some nonsense, right? Just that's rainbows. They're always hungry. They're like little bottomless pits sometimes, in the sense of, or at least that's how they act. Like they've just never been fed, even though you fed them 2 minutes ago. But yeah, maybe. I've even had like, I had the extreme version of what was that Hikari product? Man, the one that is like little bloodworms. I can't remember Hikari's exact naming, but Extreme made like a version of it, right? They think they call it Wrigglers or something like that. Vibrobites. Thank you, Zenny. Vibrobites. I had it. I just never did a video on it because to me it was like, well, it's basically the same product, and I'm only so interested in talking about fish food. But I mean, if there's enough requests for it, sure, why not? I don't really do a lot of Northfin food. I will put that out there because it's not well distributed to me. So I basically end up ordering it off Amazon, and I try not to order fish food from Amazon. I would rather order from businesses I prefer to support, if that makes sense. So I try to avoid, especially in the fish world, ordering things off Amazon, unless that's my only way to get it. Do you know where I can get some cryptocarine Florida Sunset? Good question. Good question, Gary. I don't know who is regularly selling Florida Sunset right now. I have some. I keep an amount of it in some of my tanks because I love that plant. Right now, there's a big bunch of it in the Guppy Mansion, and I kind of regularly sell it at my local club auctions. When I get enough of it, I'll thin some of it out and sell it so that other people in my club can keep it. But I haven't shipped plants in an eternity because I don't really have supplies to ship right now. But yeah. Let me see. I mean, I imagine a quick search is not going to help me very much, but it was originally a like Tropica plant, or no, sorry, Florida Aquatic Nurseries. See if any of the, because it is technically a hybrid. There's like, it's a species of Wendetii. Does Boost Plant have any? Here you go. According to boostplant.com, I'll put a link for you. I don't get anything out of this. FTC, leave me alone. I don't make nothing off this. Boost Plant supposedly has potted versions of Crypt Florida Sunset in stock. There's your Crypt Florida Sunset. Don't everybody buy it before Gary can, okay? Come on, let Gary get one. But I keep it. It's a great crypt, honestly. It doesn't get super huge, but it has phenomenal color. It doesn't need CO2, but with a touch of CO2, man, does it go like hog wild on you. And I'm talking very, very little, like 2 bubbles a second in a 40-gallon breeder. Not a lot. Not a lot. Great plant. But there you go, Gary. There's an option. Northwind is truth, but I also use foods of lesser quality because I like variety. I hate when I feel Amazon guilt because other people make better choices, but I unfortunately value convenience way too often. Yeah, that's fine. I tend to be in certain industries. It's usually my hobbies. I tend to do my best to support small business, and I make that choice. And usually, it costs me more money, or it takes longer. But I try to do my best because I realize that without those small businesses, most of my hobbies might not exist. And it's been that way through a lot of my different hobbies throughout my past. Like you guys know, I used to play a lot of Magic the Gathering. Without small game stores, Magic would not be the like monolithic game it is today. So when I would buy stuff, I would always buy from small businesses, even though it cost me more. And when Amazon started carrying Magic stuff, that was when I worked. That was when I had my best opportunity often to buy stuff through Amazon. I would choose not to, just because without those small game stores, that hobby can't really flourish the way it has. And I feel that way about fish, especially. Like, I don't want the only places that sell fish to be like my PetSmarts or Petco's, right? I want those small fish stores. So naturally, I will choose products that they carry, even when in some cases it might not be the thing I want the most, or it might not be at the best price. I will take that sacrifice to help keep those small businesses going. That's a personal choice. I totally understand anyone who's like, hey, I just wanted to show up tomorrow, man. I'm almost out. I got like 1 day left of food. I need food to show up tomorrow because my fish are hungry little piggies, right? Totally get it. Totally get it. And I don't blame anybody. It's just my personal choice. That's my way to kind of support the industry that lets me enjoy a hobby. It's my best way to put it. And not support giant, massive corporation. If you don't lean into Northfin, do you have a go-to brand? Not really. So right now, and for the last 4 years or so, my general preference has been Extreme's Community Crave Flake. But I also like the Fluval Bug Bite now that it's in a flake form. I like flake in general because I have a lot of mixtures of different sizes of fish. So it lets me just run around with one container and grind it up differently for each fish. Plus, rainbows have very small throats despite the size of their mouths on their heads. So the smaller you can get the food, generally the better. But then when it comes to like frozen food, as an example, I basically only buy Hikari BioPure, with the exception of Cyclops, which is the San Francisco Bay brand, I think. I'd have to go look at my containers downstairs. I just know what they look like at the stores I shop at. But yeah, those are the foods I tend to use. I've tried a lot of stuff. I've tried some very high-end, quotation marks around this, high-end premium foods that I liked, but in the end, I generally felt they were too expensive. I've tried some more discount brands that I used to like, but then they stopped being well distributed within my area, so they became hard to find, and then I ended up having to spend more or buy on Amazon, and I didn't want to do that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like. I just in general really like Extreme's food. It's pretty good quality. It's not horribly priced. I have a really good relationship with Extreme, so you might say that there's some bias there, but they will often send me foods to test and give them feedback. And I think part of that is just because I give them really, really detailed feedback, and that's just part of like what I do for my living, right? Because I naturally work in the like testing field, notes are a really important thing for me, and giving like books worth of detail when I can is just something I do naturally. So I give them a ton of detail when they send me iterations of food, and for some reason they They listen a lot to what I have to say. Probably more than they should. I'll be fully honest, Andy, if you're watching this, my opinion is not that important, brother. But Andy Bureau, who's him and his wife are the owner, right, of Extreme. They're such lovely people. And there's that too. I like the fact that their food came from the fact that it was what they were making to make their fish farm more effective. And they slowly have just like worked on producing different foods. They don't use Chinese manufacturer for their foods, which I really appreciate because it's a quality standards thing. I'm not really sure where Northfin has their food made. I would assume up in Canada because it's a Canadian company, but that might be completely wrong. But yeah, most of it has just been, I haven't got into Northfin a lot because there's not a lot of Northfin being carried locally. So if I don't have easy access to it and I have to order it online, I kind of start shying away from it. Plain and simple. How do you feel about Extreme suing Co-op for the use of nano, if that's even true? If it is, I'm not sure I can support them anymore just on principle. I don't even buy from the Co-op. Well, so I have really strong opinions about this, and they might be the opposite of yours, Whip. Here's my thing. You guys, I'm sure some ears might pay attention right now. I think that when you work with a company for a long period of time and you really blow them up and have a big partnership, and often we're selling your product below the what is called MAP pricing, which means minimum advertised price. Extreme used to have MAP price. I think they still do have MAP pricing. And Co-op just sold below it anyway, even though they kept trying to work with them to get it from what I've heard. This is hearsay, so technically not truth. But from what I've heard, they tried to get Co-op to sell at the same pricing, and Co-op refused. And that made it unfair for other online stores who were trying to carry Extreme's product. When you work with a company for years, and you're touting their products and you're working with their products, and then you basically rip off their product, I think you are fully deserving of a suit when there is a trademark on something. It's not a matter of who's ethically right here, because in the end, I would say that the Co-op is ethically wrong. And I'm sure he's talked about how we did all this innovation and this and that. You try to build the same product in China for less money. It's greed. It's effing greed. And I don't like it. And when a company has a trademark on something and you use that trademark flagrantly, and we could argue that trademarking the word nano is a little sus, right? It's not like it's a made up term, right? I would understand if we were talking Hikari trademarking Vibrabytes, and then someone else, Jim Bob's Fish Shack, releasing Jim Bob's Vibrabytes, right? You're asking for a lawsuit. Like, you deserve that lawsuit, and you deserve to get kicked in the teeth. I have had some serious ethical problems with a certain former business that used to be here in Washington, but now they're basically, effectively speaking, headquartered in Kentucky, because too many of the decisions seem to be founded on greed and not on doing the right thing. And I know I'm going to take some flack for this, but I don't care. Because if your image and the image you have tried to project is always about doing the right thing and what you think is best for the hobby, but your actions make it very clear that you're trying to play the Amazon game and be greedy, I have problems with that. And I might be the only voice, and that's fine. At least I'm expressing my opinion. I like everyone, have an opinion. I also have an ass. And like anyone else has an opinion, I might be an ass. I don't care, right? I am certainly open to being wrong and we can agree to disagree. But I have big problems. This was the most flagrant one to me. When you bring out a product that is very clearly designed to just clone their nano food, and it might do something different. I haven't played with it enough to really understand if there are some significant differences in the product yet. I barely got my hands on it just because of timing, and I've been busy. Plus, also, getting anything shipped to my house from the co-op is not a 1-day procedure or 2-day procedure anymore. It is bare minimum a week, and often a week and a half for me to get something from their new warehouse. And I haven't had, my weekends have been so busy lately that I haven't had time to drive up to the store, because it's like, I guarantee you lose about 5 hours of my day if I'm going to go out to the store. So I ordered it online from their business, because I have to compare it. I have to know. Because on the outside, it seems really scummy, and I'm not a fan. And I think they're absolutely deserving of a lawsuit, because you used a trademarked name. Now, can we say, I will go back to that, can we say that trademarking the name Nano is a little aggressive? Sure, I'm okay with that. But they've been working with Extreme and Extreme's products for years. And I just don't like it. I don't like it. It bothers me. Now, you could say, like, if it was we're trying to manufacture a more economical version because we've had lots of customers complain about the pricing of Extreme's food. Okay, don't clone their food. Make something different. Make something that is obviously different. They used to have these little like round ball foods, and they were fairly small, but not as small as Nano. That was like their floating pellet, basically. And it's actually a pretty good food. Definitely manufactured at some cheaper place, but this was much earlier in the Aquarium Co-op's time, and they discontinued it and started carrying Extreme's food because they really liked Extreme's food. And I cannot stay quiet anymore, because the video I'm going to do, well, I will probably have that opinion very strongly within it, because it bothers me. It really ethically bothers me. And this used to be a business that I was almost proud to say that I was just a customer of. Regina, the Extreme Nano and the Co-op Nano are very different IMO. Okay. Like I said, I haven't put in enough time yet to observe enough differences. Like, I've opened the container and just look at the granule size, but I haven't really fed it a lot lately, because I want to sit and do it in a more measured manner, where I'm like measuring out the amount of food I'm putting in and watching how it reacts in the water compared to how Extreme Nano or the Northfin new nano granule, I can't remember, it has an exact name, whatever it is, how they all act differently from each other. But it's really obvious you were targeting a specific food, and that bothers me a lot. A lot. Now, if it acts completely different, okay. Now we're starting to talk. But when you kind of jam a name that's been trademarked, I think you deserve that lawsuit. Now, if it was like they're not allowed, I'm sure they're not trying to go after anything else, but a trademark's a trademark. They have to defend their business, right? It's just business, unfortunately. Whether we like it or not, it's just business. But I've had some ethical qualms, we'll put it that way. And part of that might be because I've had a lot of people who used to work for Aquarium Co-op who I consider friends. And when, like, the warehouse shut down and they were moving to Kentucky, those people couldn't move. And they lost their jobs. And there was somebody who constantly preaches about how much they care about their employees and do things to make their employees' lives better. Right? When it felt like the Kentucky move was questionable about whether or not it was necessary. Now, for you East Coast people, you're getting your stuff a lot faster, and I'm sure that is amazing because supposedly a very large portion of their customer base is out there and not here on the West Coast. But given they started on the West Coast, it's like kind of seems tough to believe because I've seen more people on the West Coast complaining than I've seen people on the East Coast praising. But I live in my own little bubble, so yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah, they changed the name already because they received, I think, a cease and desist um, from Extreme because of the trademark. So they've already, like, because of legal action, they've already changed the name. But like, you were targeting something when you started with that name. You were doing it on purpose. That's where I think that's where the biggest problem is. But yeah. Robert, I liked the co-op a lot more before he gaslighted negative feedback. I have 3 of his single output backup air pumps, and they're incredibly weak. He says it's so the pump lasts 48 hours, but the pump is almost not even worth using. It's so weak. I do think it has its place, but it definitely, as you get under an amount of pressure, its airflow really gets hampered compared to what we're used to. And having pulled one apart and looked at it compared to some other pumps, it has to do with the type of diaphragm that's being used in the pump. It's just the equipment that is there, and part of that is probably rooted back to making the battery that's inside it last longer. But yeah, I understand your complaint, and I can't say that I've personally seen a lot of what I would consider gaslighting. Because I guess you could say I'm gaslighting right now, but whatever, right? I'm expressing my opinion. This is my opinion and not any factual content, or do I have to go into legal jargon? I don't know. I don't think so, but yeah. Hold on. I saw something. I want to get back to it. Dang it. My brain. Thought I saw something from Whip, but maybe I'm wrong. Nope, there's something else. Something else. Okay. Robert, I recall Corey talking about they already changed the name. Yeah. So we've got that one. Paul, outside of 1 or 2 items, I've switched most of the dry foods to Northfin. Interesting. At some point, Paul, you and I need to talk because I'd be curious. I trust you a lot. I'd be really interested to get your experience based on previous foods you used compared to what you're seeing with your Northfin now. Just because you have a good variety of fish, and I know that you're, especially with your gardening, that kind of background in gardening, you have a naturally meticulous nature. So it's one of those things that I'd be interested in your feedback. Not to say that I don't trust other folks in chat, but more, I know Paul really well. in the fish world. In the fish world, I know Paul really well. Let's be honest. None of us know anybody really well. Right? We're all psycho strangers who love our fish on the internet. I gotta come back down to happiness. Chris, welcome in. You probably got the less fun part of the stream, or maybe the more fun part of the stream because got me going nutso. Whip, I was gifted one of the 4-foot co-op lights, and they're solid. I'll say that. I have a bunch of their sponge filters. Other than that, I buy from other people. I actually really like the light. Having used a couple of them for a reasonable amount of time, I like the light. The only thing I don't like, I know, but this is a personal thing, is I like being able to control each individual spectrum, which I can't do. I can just do it in 10% gradients. But I think for a pure simple usability for the average person who's going to put something on their aquarium, who's just going to set it once and forget it, I think it's fine. I think it's a great light. It's durable. I don't necessarily think that a lot of the testing they did is real scenarios, other than leaving that thing in the tank on. That's impressive water sealing, right? Excuse me. But yeah, I think the light's great. I mean, I have it on brother-in-law James's new tank that we showed when we talked about the FX2. That's under an aquarium co-op light, and you can clearly see the plants are doing really well under that light. And then I also have it on the anoxic tank, but it's not on very many hours a day there. It's all controlled with a Wi-Fi controller. But I think the lights are great. And there are other products they have that I've really liked. Like I really liked their CO2 regulator, but they just had quality control problems. But the ones that I have are rock solid, and I like them a lot. I think for their like kind of bang for buck ratio, if you will, was just really good. It was a really good value in the level of quality versus price. But they had too many of them fail, so they discontinued them. And I totally understand that because it means they're having to file too many warranties, and that's going to frustrate your customers. And the last thing you want is customers getting frustrated, right? They're one of the things that Co-op has perpetually been good at, and I will never be able, at least I will put it this way, I hope I am never able to say that this changes. They have phenomenal customer service. They really do. And a lot of that comes down to Candy Overhauls, for those who know Candy, who kind of runs the customer service ship. And she's just a rock star. She's a good human being who really cares about making sure that people are taken care of. And they've, even before Candy was there, they had great customer service. So having that person there who truly cares about people being happy is really good. Plus, I just love Candy. She's awesome. Oh, man. We'll get a couple questions, then we'll take out, folks. We're a little past time, you know. That's how it is. Hoon Aquatics. When feeding dry, I feed mainly Agcor Vibrant Sticks and Omnivore Spirulina Crumble Bits. I just appreciate the size variability, semi-floating, and no fillers in the ingredients. I've never seen those before. You have to send me a link. You know how. You know the bat phone. I know I'm not as trustworthy as Polly, but I find Northfin to be a quality food. If you read the ingredients, and the fish love it. Plus, the business is small and family run. See, that I like. Family run I like. And I know that Leo, I don't know if Leo's in chat right now, but I know Leo was really big on Northfin for a bit. I think he's still using Northfin. And I know lots of people that love Northfin's food. I want to be very clear. It's just one of those things where like none of my local stores carried Northfin, and I like buying from my local stores whenever possible when it comes to as many of my fish products as I can. So often, like, I'll buy a small hoard of fish food and take it home to help support whatever business I can, because dry goods is where they tend to make their best profit margins. So I do my best to buy a lot of my dry goods from the local stores that I like to support. But sometimes, I'm sure my friend Alyssa, if she's still here, is going to tell me, like, hey, we actually carry Northfin, you dummy. I haven't looked at their food in a bit, but they used to carry two of my favorites. So I used to buy a lot of food from the fish store that Alyssa now works at. Well, pet store in general, but they have a good fish section. Whip, I'm glad you realize I'm trustworthy. Paul. Oh, man. Oh, Robert, hold on. Let me see. Was there a question to start this? No, okay. We recently lost 11 fish that died immediately after a water change. 2 different tanks, 6 roseline sharks, 5 threadfin cars, and the other. All our fish were fine. Any idea what happened? So my initial thought is this, and then there's 2 comments I want to get to regarding food. My initial thought is this, Robert. When we get to wintertime, I'm assuming this is right now in wintertime, right? When the natural water temperature that's in our water system, if you have city water especially, this is the case, but this will also kind of happen with well water. As ground temperatures and all that stuff get colder, and the natural water running through all our pipes is colder, it carries significantly more gas inside it. And when we heat it up, while it's in the pipes, it has nowhere for the gas to escape to, because as water temperature increases, the amount of gas it can carry decreases. So what happens is, when that water comes into our tank, if we're not degassing it somewhere else, and if you really want to learn about this, Dan's Fish, when they did a video explaining their entire flow-through system, explains this in great detail, this process, and why they use specific things in their warehouse. That gas has to escape inside of your tank. And what happens, it creates tons of micro bubbles, and often the most dangerous one among them is nitrogen gas. This is actually a problem for a lot of rainbow fish keepers. So in the winter, we tend to have this practice of doing smaller water changes so that we're preventing less of that gas from it coming into the water column and being a risk of our fish. Most commonly, when we see this, it's what we call the bends, which is an osmotic balance issue, where the fish will start kind of curving and swimming all weird and bendy, is the only way to really put it. And what happens is all that excess gas, then those microbubbles screw with their natural osmotic balance in fish. So their ability to maintain their kind of internal liquids, if you will, we'll put it that way. It messes with the organs, is how this actually happens. But so my initial suspicion, based on what you're saying, and especially because it's two different tanks, is that we've heated that water up a significant amount from what its initial temperature is. So what I would say is go run your water cold out of the tap and get the temperature. I bet it's something like the 50s, maybe even colder. And if that's the case, what's happening is that big temperature shift as we're getting to, say, 74, 76, 78, 80, whatever your temperature is we're shifting 25, 30 degrees in temperature. That creates a lot of gases trying to escape the water column. And it creates tons of microbubbles. And nitrogen gas, especially, is the most dangerous among them when it comes to a lot of our fish. So that would be my guess of what's going on. How do you solve this? Smaller water changes. So if you were doing, say, 50% before, try only doing 20%, but do them twice a week. You're not doing as much water change, but you are doing some water change, and that should be enough. And it's just about bringing that water in. Also, the other way is have your water come in slower. Take more time to introduce that amount of water. It can minimize the amount of gas that's completely in the water column because it gives more time for the water to kind of churn and gas itself off. I hope that helps. It's something that I do as a technique. So when I'm doing my water changes with all my rainbows in the winter, I have the water come in at about half the flow rate I would during spring and summer. So it takes significantly longer, but it's about playing it a lot safer with my fish so I don't risk any issues. Hope that helps. Really quickly, John, good to see you, buddy. My fish always preferred extreme over Northfin. Not even close, but Northfin is super clean ingredients. I might have to eventually try it just because y'all are preaching about Northfin, which is good. I like when people are passionate about things or just have positive experiences, we'll put it that way. Lumi, I use both foods. IMO, Nano is larger and my rice fish have to chew on it or I grind it. Magic Food stays afloat longer and is like a ground powder so that even the rice fish fry can eat it. Okay, I appreciate that feedback. I did notice when I opened the package for like a brief moment that its consistency was different. But to be fair, I only can tell that so well until I like kind of splay it out flat, if that makes sense. So I'm just opening a container and kind of like glancing at it and doing a little like this real quick. It was like, it feels a little more powdery. But yeah, I don't know. I need to test it. It's really what it comes down to. I need better observations than just me like opening a canister once. Paul Soltero, I get all my food from Ken's Fish. I get the selection in the area. Good pricing helps too. It's nice. This is not related to anything, but I just found my male cinnamon clownfish alive when I thought Miss Cinnamon had killed him and fed him to the anemone. Now I feel bad for accusing her. I needed that. We have to get off the angry streak and get back to the fun stuff. The Electron Man, 5 years. I've never done a water change, just add water when needed for pH 6.8 all the time. Yeah, I mean, depending on your tank, you can effectively never need a water change. But even when we're adding that water in, there's still the risk of that gas issue when we have a big temperature difference occurring, if that makes sense. Okay, gang, we're definitely over. I need to go have dinner with the wife, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Let me, one sec. I need to look at the calendar. Next week is the 17th. And then the week after that's Christmas Eve. Yeah, be here next week. If you know, you know. Be here next week. Just be here next week. All right, friends. As always, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Be here next week. Do it. I hit the wrong button.